You're listening to Transformation at Work, your one-stop guide to Salesforce success. And this is Career Corner, your guide to building your career in the Salesforce ecosystem. Our accomplished team of veterans is here to give advice and coaching on Salesforce certifications, the application process, networking, career mapping, and all the things you need to know to advance your expertise at every stage of your journey. Today, I want to talk to you about a sentiment that I have heard a lot as a podcaster and as a marketing writer before that, and as someone who got an English degree in college before that. And I'm guessing if you also majored in the humanities, you've probably heard this sentiment more than a few times. It goes a little something like, "Oh, you're a humanities major? You know, there's not a ton of jobs out there. Don't you feel like you're kind of pigeonholing yourself? What does a job with that degree even do? That's job safety. It's not a job. Why don't you major in? I just feel like a STEM degree is going to offer up a lot more career opportunities." You get the idea. And yes, recording that was very cathartic. It's this pervasive idea that doing what you love as a career has to be at odds with being successful in the job market. And that going after these sorts of human-centric, soft skill-centered majors, experiences, job paths might prove to be a roadblock in finding a long-term career in something like the Salesforce ecosystem. And to that, I say think again. The fact of the matter is, while STEM majors and technical experiences do make someone well-suited for roles such as development and product design, there are so many areas within the Salesforce ecosystem that are perfectly well-suited for someone whose background is in relating to people and forging real human connection. Case in point, we sat down with Jayda Roberts, Senior Change Management Consultant at Gerent, who came to the ecosystem and to the world of change management through a background in social work. Her story is a perfect example of someone taking that humanities background and finding meaningful success in the Salesforce space, and underscores the real fact that for employees with backgrounds in the humanities, you're not facing an impenetrable wall, but rather a doorway to long-term career success, and you just need to knock on. We begin our conversation by having Jayda break down her story in her own words. What got her into social work, her experiences in the field, and what prompted her move into the Salesforce ecosystem. Here's Jayda.
I loved helping people when I was younger. I had such a passion for helping others. And I was actually studying abroad in Spain when I was, I believe, a junior in high school, and I was severely homesick. And so I brought a book and I was like, let me just hop in and start reading this book. And I just became immersed. And it was called Pigs in Heaven by Barbara Kingsolver. And after reading that book, there was a social worker in the book. And I just wanted to be that person. I wanted to be the person advocating and making a difference in someone else's life. And also I had a friend whose older sister was also a social worker, and I volunteered for her here and there throughout my high school years. And I just had so much fun helping others. And so that's how it got me started being a social worker. So I went to college, graduated as a social worker, and I worked with the homeless population for about 7 years. I also worked in the child protection space, and all of it is very rewarding, except it gets difficult being able to compartmentalize your home life and your work life. And it was a struggle. And after I had my daughter, it just got to a point where it was just, things were too real whenever I'd meet with one of my clients at the homeless shelter. And it was terrifying. And I was looking to make a move, and my father-in-law was a sales rep at a sales company, and he gave me a shot. And so I moved over to sales, and from sales, I moved to the mortgage industry. And from there, I was given an opportunity to begin at a consulting company. And that kind of kickstarted my interest in consulting, as well as jumpstarting my career in the Salesforce ecosystem.
So that's how you got into Salesforce. But talk to me about what brought you into change management in particular, because I feel like that's not necessarily a field that you think of when you think Salesforce opportunities. So I'm curious, what was it that brought you into that space in particular?
At the first consulting company that I started with, I was a project lead, and I also dabbled in project management and some business analyst pieces. And I was working with one of my managers, and she was just like, "I think you'd be great for change management." And I was like, "I have never heard of it. I don't even know what you're talking about." So I did some research, and she hooked me up with someone who then became my manager, and I had a wonderful experience with this change management manager. And she just got me so excited about change management and the opportunities that lie there, and really just the ability to help people yet again. I loved doing that. And so I was doing some research on change management. I then applied for a change management position at a different consulting company, and I got the job, and it was super exciting. It was just something completely different. Wasn't working on the technical side as much, but having that technical experience was definitely helpful when working with clients in regards to change management, and also just trying to help them be a little bit more at ease with the transition of moving from a legacy CRM per se, and then also moving into a Salesforce CRM.
You mentioned you did your research. You mentioned you were kind of introduced to this because your manager had said, "Hey, I think this is a great fit for you." What was the spark, I guess is what I would say. What was the spark that really got you to say, I think this is something that I want to pursue further, and something that you felt that I think I could see myself in this space?
I think it was the people-centric focus of change management along with problem solving. I am definitely someone who is a problem solver. If I'm coming to you with a question, that means I have exhausted every single possible resource that I can. So I want to get in there. I want to dig in, and I want to help others. And I want to help them move from a state of fear to a state of feeling relaxed. And having that people-centric focus instead of the technical side is what really sparked me to move into the change management space.
From one problem solver to another, same. I get it. It's a familiar energy. And yes. I think that really segues to the next thing that I wanted to ask you, which is so you've walked in these two worlds, right? You've made this transition from social work into Salesforce, and from there into the sort of narrower field of change management. And what I'd really love to ask you is what do you see as the common skills between these two backgrounds that on the surface are very, very different? What do you see as sort of the commonalities between them that maybe set you up for success in your current role?
When I was actually thinking about this podcast, I was like, it's so different. How are there similarities? And I sat down and really thought about it. And there are so many similarities. It's very people-centric and focused, like I'd mentioned before. While social workers are aiming to improve individuals' well-being, change managers are helping, an organization adapt to change. So instead of it being so localized, it's more on a broader scale, but it's still people-centric. Also, empathy, communication. Communication is a huge part of change management. A lot of implementations and processes fall short because there isn't great communication between, let's say, a manager and, an employee. So having that communication piece was really, really helpful. Also, the problem solving, both social workers and change managers, we often deal with some complex problems. And so we are trying to address issues in clients' lives as a social worker. And then as a change manager, trying to tackle organizational challenges during transitions, adaptability, advocacy. Advocacy is a huge piece in social work, but it's also a huge piece in change management. I'm advocating for the end users to ensure that the implementation and the process is streamlined, efficient, and ultimately has great user adoption. We also do a lot of assessments in change management. As a social worker, you also do the same. You're creating individualized plans. In change management, you're creating, readiness assessments, and helping to develop other change management plans and strategies for clients. And also outcome measurements. We want to see people succeed as social workers, but also as change managers, we're assessing the impact of the interventions and how everything played out.
The thing that you mentioned that really jumped out to me is sort of moving from addressing personal challenges to organizational challenges. When you look at an organization, it is ultimately just a group of people, right? Like that ability to connect on a one-to-one level and sort of see someone's challenges and walk them through it. And like you said, get to that place of comfort that at large is affecting a change in an organization.
Yes, completely. So with change management, we have individuals who are called change champions, and also stakeholders within the project. And so meeting with the change champions, and those individuals are essentially cheerleaders. They have the ability to be a little bit more influential in the organization that we're working with. And they can be there as like a sounding board or offering comfort with the change, but also really out there cheering on the change and letting people know, like, this is an amazing transition. So while, yes, we're working with a larger organization as a whole, we're also working with individuals within that organization to really help champion that change.
So that's how Jayda made the leap, and that illustrates some of the clear skill translations that roles such as social work or other people-centric careers bring to the table when it comes to change management, or more broadly, Salesforce consulting on the whole. But the question still remains, if I am an employee and my background isn't necessarily in technology or business or product or any of these things, how can I best get my foot in the door in the Salesforce ecosystem and ensure that I am as successful as possible in my new role? When we asked that question to Jayda, here's what she had to say.
Be willing to learn. Be willing to throw yourself into it. Be willing to study for the certs. Be willing to just learn about all aspects of Salesforce, even if it's not the position that you're looking for. Just learning about like business analysts, learning about an admin, because a lot of things do overlap. But what a business analyst does and what I do, some pieces overlap. Communicating with the client and trying to understand their organization. It's definitely things that everybody does within the Salesforce ecosystem, regardless of the role that they have. Building a network and connecting with people is also huge. People are amazing in the Salesforce ecosystem. And anytime I reach out to someone, whether it be here at Gerent or just even in the Salesforce space, they're so helpful and everyone's so willing to help you and help you thrive.
So to build on that a little bit, like, let's say that I am a prospective employee, right? And I'm reaching out to you, Jayda, to say, like, I want to get involved in the Salesforce ecosystem. My background really isn't in those technical analytical worlds. What do you see as the must-haves? What are the skills that I should be focusing on? What are the areas that I should really be prioritizing? How do I make sure that I am as successful as possible within the Salesforce ecosystem?
I think some must-have skills for someone looking to move into the change management space would be communication skills. A lot of implementations fall short, like I mentioned before, with lack of communication. So I think communication is huge, even just communicating with the stakeholders in the project, but also encouraging and assisting with the appropriate communication plans and helping to develop communication copy for companies is really crucial at times. Leadership, ability to inspire and guide a team through the change process. Also problem solving. It's definitely a big piece, trying to find a way to be able to break through those roadblocks and develop solutions to overcome the hesitancy of the change. Project management also isn't a bad piece. Just being very organized, I think, is helpful with any type of position, but specifically around change management, you're working with a lot of different moving parts. So I think being very organized and detail oriented is also a plus. And conflict resolution. I've learned a lot through my days as a social worker with conflict resolution, but also when you're a change manager, you're working with stakeholders who are on board and want to do this change, and then you're working with others who aren't. And so trying to mitigate those conflicts within an organization, and you're kind of the unbiased party. So getting in there and being that sounding board for both aspects of the stakeholders is really, really helpful.
And the thing that really jumps out to me is that, like, all of those are really valuable skills, but they're also skills that you're going to pick up on, in a lot of different areas, right? Those aren't necessarily things that are kind of siloed into these sorts of technical spaces. There's a world of careers where you're going to pick up on a lot of these must-haves, right? Would you agree with that?
I completely agree. And I also want to add that empathy is also something that's huge with a lot of positions, whether it be in the Salesforce ecosystem, change management, social work. Empathy is crucial when working with clients. And you need to be able to understand their concerns and vulnerabilities and be on their level of sorts to be able to help them be successful.
And now, which also kind of brings up the opposite, right? Because we're talking about skills. We've talked a lot about skills. We've talked a lot about sort of the interpersonal skills that could make someone really successful. But the reality is that that technical component is always going to be a part of it. I mean, Salesforce is digital technology, right? So talk to me about like how you developed your technical skill set once you got into the Salesforce space that ensured that you were really successful moving forward in your career.
Education and training. Trailhead's free. You can go out there, you can sign up for a Trailhead account, and you can start your Trailhead journey there, and you learn a lot. I have about 4 certifications under my belt now, and I've leveraged Trailhead and I've leveraged some other like third-party pieces to be able to study for those exams. So education and training is definitely huge. As a change manager, I looked into a few type of certifications for change management through the ACMP with Persi, and those are really, really helpful. So overall, education and training. Also a mentorship. I had someone who was a manager, eventually my manager, but I was leveraging her and her experience and trying to understand her day-to-day, trying to understand her take on change management, and also, using her as a sounding board, wondering if this was a good move for me. And ultimately it was. So mentorship is great. Reading, research, just getting online and, searching Salesforce and understanding the opportunities that are out there. Salesforce is such an enormous ecosystem, and understanding the opportunities that are available with Salesforce. Also, networking is huge when it comes to the Salesforce ecosystem, even if it's on LinkedIn, joining groups on LinkedIn that are centered around Salesforce or change management. Those have been really, really helpful. Going to conferences and meeting people who are in the ecosystem is amazing.
And so my final question for you, we're talking about advice. We're talking about advice to prospective employees. And I want to ask you, what advice would you give yourself, right? You're starting out your journey. You're making that transition out of the world of social work. What advice are you giving you at the start of your career journey?
Just learning to trust the process, I think, is what I would tell myself looking back. Also, manifestation's huge. Just putting the positive vibes out there and really understanding your capabilities and what you can do is ultimately going to create your success.
I love that. And what I really like about that is that, I think your story in particular is very emblematic of a lot of people's experience, right? You made this transition. You moved into a field that was at first unfamiliar, particularly shifting into this change management space. But the skills and experiences that you brought to the table really set you up for success for that. And I think there are a lot of employees, not just in social work, but in kind of the broader corporate world, that have similar experiences, skill sets, passions that would translate pretty nicely. And so I think that is something that rings true for a lot of people.
I completely agree. Unless you throw yourself into it, you're never going to know. You're never going to understand. I know that we've mentioned before, social work and change management are vastly different, but I've learned so much from social work that I currently use in my position with change management in Salesforce. Just the communication, the empathy, relationship building with clients, with coworkers. It's, again, just trusting the process and trusting yourself and knowing that you're going to be okay. You're going to make it. And learning is a huge part of it. And if you're willing to learn, you can thrive in the Salesforce ecosystem. Take a chance, take a leap, trust the process, go for it.
If Jayda's story tells us anything, it's that there's no one pathway to success. The transition from social work into Salesforce might not seem like a straightforward one at first glance, but those skills and experiences that she picked up ultimately proved to be exactly what she needed in helping teams and organizations go through this long and often difficult process of adopting new technology and changing their processes to transform their organization on the whole. And when you look at it in that context, coming into Salesforce from social work or sales or any number of other people-centric fields makes all the sense in the world, in the same way that you might not think podcaster is a straightforward entryway into the Salesforce ecosystem, and yet here we are. At the end of the day, it really comes down to identifying your skills, identifying your passions, and finding the spaces that you might not immediately know about that allow you to use those skills to make the biggest impact possible. Do that, and whether your skills and background are technical, people-focused, or other, you're really primed for long-term success within the Salesforce ecosystem. This has been Transformation at Work. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you again to Jayda for a really wonderful and insightful conversation. Transformation at Work is, as always, produced by Gerent in collaboration with Salesforce. I am Jeff Stormer, your host and producer. If you enjoyed the show, consider leaving us a 5-star review on iTunes or Spotify, or head to gerent.com to sign up for email updates when we release new episodes. Until next time, thank you again for listening, and we hope to see you again soon.